Hey everyone, Happy New Year. Just wrapped up talking with American R&B soul singer-songwriter Eli Paperboy Reed. We talked about his hometown of Brookline, Massachusetts, cutting teeth, defining music, managing life after being dropped by Warner Bros., his aspects of the music industry, meaning behind Fundamental Humanity, lessons life taught him recently, Down Every Road album, when he feels accomplished, most immersive or out-of-body experiences, and more. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Eli. Eli, Happy New Year. Welcome to the show.
Happy New Year. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I want to start off by saying that, I was doing some research on you and I mean everything has been so good for you in your career already, but I was listening to some interviews that you've been doing. And something that stuck out to me was you said that um I mean you grew up in Boston, Massachusetts.
Mhm.
But majority was it in Brookline, Massachusetts?
Yeah, that's Brookline is just right outside of Boston. You can walk. That's
Yeah.
where I grew up and went to high school
Yeah, and then where do you currently live? Brooklyn?
in Brooklyn, in New York. Yeah,
Yeah.
for 15 years.
Yeah, because that's where I was born.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Brooklyn, New York. So that's really exciting things. And you talked about musical household as well. You talked about your father who really got you into that old soul contemporary kind of country music sort of sound. Can you elaborate more on that?
I mean, there was just a lot of music in my house growing up. Yeah, from country music that was on the radio, and also a lot of records from my dad's collection, soul and blues and gospel and older country music, and just a lot of music in my house all over the place.
Yeah, and what other artists have you really like honed in on in your music?
Oh, I mean, there's too many to count. I'm a big record collector too. You know, everything from gospel quartet music like the Sensational Nightingales or the Swanee Quintet, things like that, and then also soul singers and blues singers like Howlin' Wolf and stuff like that. There's just there's some. I'm every day I listen to new music, and every day I find more stuff that I haven't heard of.
Yeah, do you ever feel influenced by going out to the nature and the environment and feeling out things?
I don't get a chance to do that all that often. Being in the city, I wish I had more opportunities to do that.
Yeah, because I know a lot of the artists that I've spoken to have already talked about, being out into the environment and feeling out what their music is truly inspired by. And I feel like a lot of your music is Memphis style, but also a really cool mix of contemporary country, old school, and R&B soul. But how do you really define your music?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think I hope that after having been doing this for coming up on 20 years, geez, I hope that it sounds like me, I guess, and I've been able to take in all the influences of the things that I love, and when you put my records on, that you recognize them as mine. Um, it's got eight records under my belt. Gonna have another one this year, and just a lot of music, and I hope I think at least that people can sense a through line with all of them.
Hmm. And as we were talking about earlier in the beginning of the interview about musical household, and for those who are new to your music and new to finding out who you are as an artist, how did your passion begin for music?
I think it was really just listening growing up. Again, like that's what I try to do with my kids too, is just to play music all the time, and if there's something they gravitate to, then I can try to find more of it. And I think that's what my dad did for me, when I was growing up and listening to you know Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly and things like that he would put on, and then country music that was on the radio, and he sensed that I liked that and took me to Nashville when I was a kid and to see some of that stuff. So it's just trying to cultivating the things that I gravitated towards, and my dad really helped with that a lot.
Hmm. And what would you say your songwriting style would be?
I think I try really hard to create a strong melody and lyrical kind of phrase that hooks you in. I try to write from titles. That's usually how I work. Is if I come up with a kind of a turn of phrase or a title that is evocative, and I kind of work backwards from there. That's generally the way I like to write songs.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about in your biography about songs that spoke to you.
Mm.
And do you feel like that also resonates with what you just said about your songwriting style?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, those are the kind of songs that I like too. Are songs that I feel are very direct and also, have a good turn of phrase and lyrics that kind of can be interpreted in a lot of ways, but are also fairly straightforward and simple.
Absolutely. And I was just listening to Vince Gill when he was honored at the CMT Giants, and he was talking about Kenny Rogers.
Yeah.
And he said something of the likes of, I was listening to an interview with Kenny Rogers, and he was asked, Kenny, you just put out a new record. Do you want it to be successful? And Kenny says, no, I don't want it to be successful. I've had so many successful records already in my career. What I want this record to be is significant.
Hmm.
And do you feel like for your music and the experiences that you've had already in your career, do you feel that goes same for you?
You know, I feel like I've had a lot of ups and downs in my career. I just hope that I can continue to be, to make records and that people will be able to put them on and enjoy them. Success is hard to measure these days. I have a little family. I got two small kids and a wife, and I feel very successful in having been able to make music for my career and life for as long as I have been. So if I can keep doing that, I will feel very successful.
And obviously, like something that really stuck out to me was you're very honest in where you come from in terms of music because there are a lot of BS out there.
Mm.
There are a lot of BS. And so how do you kind of manage that honesty in your music?
I try to do the things that I like, whether it's making records or producing records or working on the compilations that I've been able to produce or DJing, all the things that I do are just gravitating around the things that I think are important and want the world to hear more of, whether it's my own music or otherwise. This Merle Haggard record, I just this was an idea that I've had for a long time, and I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought it was great. I thought that other people would like it, and so that's what I went ahead and did. I try not. I feel very strongly in my convictions, I suppose, in what I think is good and important.
Yeah, totally. And you just spoke about conviction. Do you feel like when you go out on stage on the road or performing anywhere in the US or performing elsewhere, do you feel like that conviction of meaning everything you say and every word that you perform is really important to how you navigate your music?
I mean, I think that soul music, or at least the kind of the my performance aesthetic and where it comes from, is drama. Not everything can be real 100% of the time, and I think it's important to understand that. But I think like I'm not. I think it's important that the audience is sort of in on the the joke in a way. They're there to get swept away, with you, and I think you can all do that together. Everybody has to suspend their disbelief a little bit when they go see a show. That's if you can't, I feel like you're not going to enjoy yourself. I feel this. I mean, I have a hard time doing that when I go see music. So it's hard to be an audience member and to just to kind of let yourself be free of irony and all of the things that and just enjoy yourself and dance and sing along. I think that's the best way to experience a live show.
Absolutely. And I feel like you've also mentioned about, cutting teeth, like when was that sort of experience for you?
Sure. I mean, I learned I spent a lot of time in a lot of different situations where I had to kind of trial by fire, whether it was playing in Mississippi in little clubs or in black churches or in gospel groups and things like that. And to have those opportunities to cut my teeth, yes, but also to be given the leeway to learn. I think that was I I'm so grateful for the time that I was able to spend in those sorts of environments, and I would not be the kind of musician or singer if I didn't have that time.
Absolutely. And your record labels that you had was Q Division, Warner Bros, Capitol Records, and Yep Rock Records.
Mm-hmm.
And in an interview that you did, you talked about how Warner Brothers dropped you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you talked a lot about like taking chances on people and taking chances on different opportunities. What was that experience for you to know that like Warner Bros dropped you, but how did you manage it?
It was a very, it was a very difficult time for the industry as a whole, not just for me. Um, it was a frustrating situation. I felt like I made a record that ought to have been given another opportunity to succeed. But you play the hand that you're dealt. And that's all I could really do in that situation. It was hard, but at the time, I left Warner Brothers, and I had some time on my hands, and I made a record that I was really proud of on my own with my own money. And that became the album My Way Home, which has been one of my more successful albums to date. It's I think it has the most streaming numbers of any of my records, and that's what brought me to Yep Rock, which has been my recording home for the past 7 years. So, I suppose you make your own opportunities and luck, but sometimes you get put into situations that are difficult, and you got to find your way out of them. And I think that's sort of what I did.
Yeah, completely right. And I think that like, the music industry is such a cutthroat business. Um, and you have to have thick skin in order to get through everything in your career.
Yeah,
And I remember watching this video from Ashley Cook, who's a rising country artist,
sure, yeah.
and she posted something about this young girl who's performing her song, covering her song on Instagram, just sitting on her, bedroom floor, in front of a camera, just recording
Mm,
herself. And she says that, with all the success that Ashley's having, she looks at that and says, man, that reminds me of how I started my career.
mhm.
Like starting in my parents' bedroom, just sitting on the floor, recording music, just recording myself on a camera. And so she also said that like building that foundation is important, right? Starting from scratch,
Totally.
just scratching the surface. For you, was that how you started out, just posting videos online, and then eventually one thing led to another?
No, I mean there was no place to post videos online when I started out. You know, there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook. I mean, maybe there was Facebook, I guess. Yeah, there was Facebook, but not. It was only for colleges at that point. No, there was no. I started out playing music. Like the first way I made money playing music was playing music on the street in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then from there, I started playing around after I came back from college, playing around Boston. So started playing live. I mean, that's the difference between the way that I started my career and the way people start their careers now is vast. And it hasn't even been that long. You know, like being able to just sit on your computer. I mean, during the pandemic, I did live streams every day for a long time, and then I did them every week. And the people that I was able to reach, the amount of people just by doing live streams every day was insane. I couldn't like there was there were no opportunities like that when I started out. No.
Hmm. And then obviously you just talked about like it was so vastly different from when you started to now how it is in these days. But when you look at the music industry now, what do you see?
Well, I think in a way the music industry has returned to this kind of the situation it was before albums were the most important thing. In the records that I love in the 60s and 70s were very singles driven. And now music again is very singles driven. Because you don't need to put out a whole album. You can put out a song every day if you want to. It's so easy to get music out to your fans, and to get music up online. Um, there's a lot lot of music out there right now. And I think that's hard, and it's hard to cut through the clutter. But at the same time, the people that do are the ones that have worked really hard and find their way. It's a strange time for sure.
Yeah, completely right. And you talked about something of the likes of fundamental humanity.
Hmm.
What was that for you?
Fundamental humanity. I mean, that's sort of what I try to strive for in anything that I make. And I think it's that's what people gravitate towards when they love a song or an artist or a performance is the shared emotional connection that we all are looking for. That's what music is supposed to be. you know People take my songs however they want to take them. They take them and make them their own, and not they're not mine anymore. They belong to someone else.
Absolutely. And you know, I feel so like attached to that term of fundamental humanity because
Mm.
it's just so interesting how you perceive music. It's in a whole different trajectory, I think. From the way I look at music is, like it's definitely ever changing. It changes by the minute, by the second. And it's hard to even get your song at number one, let alone in the number 10 spot, right? Like you really have to put out a song that is something of specialty that no one has heard ever before, and that's the way to create that successful song is being able to make something, as I will refer this to as cooking, right? Like Gordon Ramsay would say that, like, what you have to do to become a successful restaurant is you have to make something better than what people can make at home.
Right.
That's right. And for music, I feel like you have to make a song that nobody can make better than yours, right? And that's kind of the way to kind of
That's the
cut
goal.
through, right? That's the goal, but literally I perceive it as that's the first cut through moment for you,
Sure.
right? But it's not like the substantial moment where you say, well, I have a career now, right?
No,
Right,
it's
like
not at all.
right, like
No.
how do you perceive that?
I mean, I think it's not even really up to you. It's up to the listener, right? If they decide this is something that they want to listen to and haven't heard before, you do your best to make something that represents yourself, and then it's up to the audiences to decide if it's something that they feel connected with. It doesn't really belong to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it ever weird when you create music and you work on it for so long and then you put it out into the world and then you say that, well, now this music is not mine, it's theirs, right? How do you really manage that?
I mean, I think that's great. That's the point, right? And I like to be finished with things. That's sort of like the best feeling. It's like I have this body of work, and these are things that are done. I can pick it up in my hand and hold a stack of records that I've made. I'm not going to go back in and make them again. It feels great to have them be out in the world, and then they can go and become a part of someone else's life.
Yeah, and something that's very fascinating about, people recording music is I've always wanted to know this, that when you make and record songs, when do you know that you've already had a successful album already completed?
When do you know you're done? It's hard to know. I think that's something that people say that I'm good at. People who are like my friends who make music, some people have a hard time making that distinction, knowing when to stop. I try very hard to be able to say, okay, this is done. We don't need anything more. This is finished, or take things away even, and you know it's not a skill everyone possesses. Some people keep
Yeah,
working on it for years.
absolutely. And do you think that, like, well, I would probably suppose so, that, like, don't you I feel like you have a lot of inspiration also from your family, being able to know that they're right by your side, while you kind of sacrifice time for yourself to put out these records and share your music with the world. Is that of importance to you?
I mean, my family right now. I mean, my life has changed so dramatically, since I've had kids, and and how, my priorities and where they're at. I think it's become just a different experience to be a musician or a creative person when you have a family. You have to take a back seat. you know
Yeah. And when would you say I mean, everyone has the highest moments, but when would you say was the lowest point for you?
the lowest point, it's a hard one. I mean, the pandemic was really hard. To be able to not be out performing, and like the fact that singing with people was something that was very, that was one of the more dangerous things you could do, in COVID. So that was really hard. I mean, you know, being dropped from the majors was hard. That was really hard. I think, touring can you can get real down when you're out on the road. It's I mean, this is it's a tough life, man. It's tough, especially because so much of it is highs and lows, playing incredible shows and for tons of people that love you, and then maybe the next night you play for 10 people who don't give a shit. you know just like that's the way of the world, of being a musician on the road.
Absolutely. And speaking of the touring and stuff like that, is there a favorite story that you have from the road?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. You got to give me a little bit more specific parameters. I mean, the road is like, I mean, I toured so much back in the day. I mean, and we started off touring, 8 guys in a van with no trailer, all of our stuff in the back, and it was for weeks and months. And I toured relentlessly, and it kind of all runs together after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will follow up with this question because I've found that this question has really made people think for a second.
Okay.
And I really wanted to challenge you on this question to see if you were able to answer this question or not. And the question is, what would you say is the most powerful or out of body experience in music?
Man, I mean, for me, being and singing in church, when it's like to the point where everybody is in the spirit, and it's not about you or them or anybody else. It's about everyone together. That's the greatest feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, do you feel like what's actually one thing that someone told you that you'll never forget?
Hmm. Someone told me that I'll never forget. Hmm. It's a hard one. I mean, I learned so much. I have had so many amazing mentors in my life. Um, my good friend Roscoe Robinson, he's in his 90s now. He's a singer, soul singer, and a gospel singer. I mean, he's given me so much advice about life, and not just performance and singing, but love and everything. So it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but I just would have to, anything that he said to me, I feel like I've had to think about and remember, because it's all worth remembering.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for me, the mentors for me would be probably my high school vice principal,
Oh,
because he was the one that actually initially got me into the passion for doing podcasting, and
nice.
made me go into college to study radio broadcasting, which I graduated from, which is really crazy to think that, like, one can see something in you and say that that's what you should do, and ultimately you go and pursue it, and then
Sure.
ultimately you find yourself in a moment like this speaking to people like you,
I
and
appreciate that.
it's such a fulfilling moment. When is a moment in your life that you say that I am fulfilled?
I mean, playing on the Opry was really amazing for me. It was something I never thought would happen in my life, and my parents got to go and see me play, I really just I would never have expected that to happen.
Yeah, and like I've always well, shout out to the Opry. I need to put this plug to the Opry. Opry. We need to get this guy inducted into the Opry.
I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Hopefully I'll get to come back and play again.
Yeah. But I just really feel like there's a connection between you and your music. It's honest, it's authentic, it's something that's unique.
Well, thank you for
And but like, when do you feel like you say to yourself that, you know, I do feel like there's something that I have potential in? When is that moment when you say that, like, you believe in yourself, rather when people say that they believe in you?
I mean, I think that for me, it was from the kind of not from the beginning, I guess, but I certainly had maybe more unwarranted confidence than I than I should have had early on, and I think that's part of what got me where I am today is that I just had self confidence and I believed in myself and my own abilities, and I mean, I think you have to have that, otherwise, nobody's going to do it for you from the beginning,
Yeah. And so as we're wrapping up this interview, I want to ask you about what has life taught you recently?
Man. I mean, I think you can't take anything for granted, that's for sure. You
Yeah.
know, with especially, coming out of the pandemic, I mean, you can't take anything for granted. You can't take, especially as a musician, like things have changed so dramatically in the past couple of years for what it means to make a living playing music, you
Do
know.
you do you feel accomplished?
Sometimes. I think it depends on the day.
But when would you say that you feel that you weren't accomplished?
I think I just feel sometimes like I wish I had more than I do, I guess. But then again, I put 3 records out last year. I put on my own record and then a record I produced and then a compilation I produced. That's a lot of stuff that I worked on, when you sum it up that way. It doesn't feel like a lot when you're doing it. But then you kind of figure it out, you think about it after the fact, and then you realize that a lot got done, I'm always balancing a lot of projects, you know and there's
Yeah.
setbacks and steps forward every day. Every day things happen and then things get sidetracked. It just every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think, like, for me, like, I sometimes will have those off days where I just feel like there's something just empty,
Sure.
like, where you're like, you do an interview with somebody and you say that you could have been better at this, you could have been better at that, and you kind of feel like there's something that there was left to give.
Hmm.
And then you don't feel satisfied with it.
Totally.
But you have to put it out into the world, even though you did an interview with somebody and you're not proud of it, right? But you want to put it out just to share that, like, this is a raw feeling that you have. It's honest. It's not like someone can just BS you and say that, like, you're not happy with how it came out. Some people can portray it as, that, but I feel like a lot of it is just me not being satisfied with something. um
Sure.
so I want to close out the interview by asking you, what is your number one advice for aspiring artists?
Believe in what you do. Believe in yourself. I think that's the only thing. I mean, I know it feels like a cliche, but I think if you don't do it, nobody else is gonna.
Yeah. And so, well, we've come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, to the listeners who made it this far into the episode, thanks so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with American R&B soul singer-songwriter Eli Paperboy Reed. You can find him on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Eli Paperboy Reed. For more info, visit elipaperboyreed.com. To support the show, please feel free to share it with family and friends or on social media. You can find the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and on YouTube. Lastly, you can also find my show on all podcast streaming platforms. I've been your host, Jigme Kelsang. Thanks for tuning into the show.